Now, if we have a job and we've gotten job training, the next thing we need are assignments to apply that training to. Right? It just makes good sense. Now, since we have two jobs, we need two sets of assignments, but we're going to parallel them so the one will complement the other. In other words, the one will make it easier to learn the other. So our job assignments, you can see for data and data analysis, we have 3 projects each. Of course, we need 3 projects like per se in data analysis because we have to have one study for each structure of variable, right? The continuous and 2 categoricals, right? So that's why we have 3 because we want to make our learning complete, right? They're going to be data analysis studies, and the daters will be data analysis studies. In both studies, we're looking for the strongest relationships. So data analysis, the strongest independent-dependent variable relationship, and in data analysis, the strongest independent suitor and dependent client relationship. We have to turn in reports on each, and our software for both is SPSS. So in data analysis, that's software package for the social sciences, and in data analysis, it's seeking people, seeking soulmates, sorting people, seeking soulmates. Yes, sorting people, seeking soulmates. So try to keep it on par as possible. So here we go. So it's much easier in statistics to have images and figures rather than words. You know, it's very visual type of learning. So the first visual we have is our blueprint for a data analysis study. So we have 4 independent variables on the left-hand side on the top here, and they have arrows going to the dependent variable. So what that's suggesting is that there's going to be a relationship between the independent variable, where the independent variable impacts the dependent variable. So if the first one is male or female, how does being a male or female impact the level of depression as the dependent variable, right? And we want to find of those 4 which has the strongest relationship with the dependent variable. At the same time, below we have the blueprint for the data analysis study, right? So we have our 4 suitors, right? So if that's Terry, Jordan, all those names, right? We have our suitors and we have our dependent client. And the dependent client wants to know just which of these people do I have the strongest relationship with, so I should go out on a date. That's your analysis point for that. So if we're going to have this type of study and implement those blueprints so we can employ our job training, we're going to need some clients for our dating analysis, and we're going to need some dependent variables for our data analysis. So here they are. So remember, we're going to need 1 dependent variable per study. So if we have 3 studies, we need 3 dependent variables, all structured differently. And we're going to need 3 dependent clients. So here they are. So for our job 1 as a data analyst, your dependent variables are 1, happiness, measured on a continuous scale. So the responses can be from 1 to 5, with 5 indicating more happiness, a continuous measure of happiness. And then number 2 is happiness with 2 categories, a yes-no response. Are you happy? Yes, no. Now you'll see, that I used happiness for all of them. And this is done for several reasons. One is to remind us that the construct is not important, right? It could be happiness and depression and job satisfaction. It doesn't matter. What we're looking at in these, deciding what statistics to use, is that structure. Is it continuous, 2 categories, or 3 or more, right? That's what we want to look at. So the construct can be the same, but we'll be using different statistical tests determined on how it's structured. and actually the independent variables will predict the dependent variable differently, even if it's the same construct, depending on how it's structured. For example, education might be related to happiness on a continuous scale, but education might not be related to happiness when it's yes, no, two categories. It's very interesting. And then our third dependent variable is happiness with 3 or more categories. We have happiness, 3 categories, yes, no, somewhat. Okay? So job 2, our dating, you're going to be a data analyst, right? Our dependent clients, right? We try to keep them parallel. We have Connie, continuous happiness, right? So she has the continuous emotional type. So she has a wide range of emotion, a wide range of happiness from 1 to 5. And you might even say that they're the happiness sisters, the 3 happiness sisters, right? Just like the constructs are the same, they're from the same family, so are they, right? Then we have Diana, dichotomous happiness. That's what a 2-category variable is referred to. If you have a yes-no variable, it's a categorical with 2 categories, because di means to cut in half. That's called dichotomous, right? So Diana, dichotomous happiness, which means she's either happy yes or no, no in between. And then Trixie, trichotomous happiness, that's what a variable that's been cut into 3 categories is called. So any variable where there's a 3-category response is trichotomous. So Trixie, trichotomous happiness is happy, yes, no, somewhat, right? So kind of either yes or no or kind of neither, right? So those are our the foci, the focuses of our studies. So then, if we're going to have dependence, we need independence, right? We need independent variables to match up with our dependent variables, and we need independent suitors to match up with our dependent clients. So here's what we got. So we're going to be looking at happiness as a dependent variable, and we're going to compare it to these independent variables. First of all, many bills monthly. So do you get many bills a month? Yes or no, right? And how does that impact your happiness? Your education level. How does your education level impact your happiness? Number 2, how does your level of humor impact your happiness? And number 4, how does your level of aloofness impact your happiness? Right? So those are our independent variables. Now, the same way we're paralleling, we're going to keep the suitors parallel with those, right? So our independent suitors, Manny bills monthly, Manny as in, the nickname from Manuel, right? And the emotional type is yes, no. And then education levels, number 2, suitor number 2. Then suitor number 3 is humor, and then suitor number 4 is aloofness. Now I want you to get curious, the same way you would think about which independent variable relates to the dependent variable. How would these personified variables relate to the dependent client, right? You could start to speculate on what relationships might be in both cases. So now here we go. These are our blueprints for analysis. This is where it all becomes much, much more clearer, because our studies will be answered once we define these blueprints. So remember, our job is to find the strongest relationship in each study. So the blueprint for data analysis study 1. Right? So you can call these arrows relationship lines. Sometimes I like to call them, because what they represent is the relationship between, per se, independent variable 1 and the dependent variable 1, right? So what's the relationship between having many bills monthly, and how does that impact dependent variable 1, your continuous level of happiness? How does your education level impact your continuous level of happiness? The same with humor and aloofness. What's the relationship between aloofness and your continuous level of happiness. And when I say relationship, remember we have to define these as in, is it significant first, right? Remember our 3 dimensions. Is it significant, right? Is it, what's the next one? Directionality, right? If it is significant, is it a positive or negative relationship? And then after that, we want to figure out what's the magnitude. Does it have a slight positive or negative relationship, or is it a major one? And then out of those, which has the strongest relationship to happiness? Now we're looking at the same thing down here for the blueprint for data analysis study 1, right? So if Connie Continuous Happiness is our client and she wants to be set up on a date, we have 4 suitors that might be appropriate. Our job is to figure out, of her and her emotional type, continuous, just like happiness, which suitor might she have the strongest relationship with, right? You might say, like, humor. Well, someone with a lot of happiness might like someone who has a lot of humor, right? But of course, that's just speculation, right? If she could figure that out for herself, she wouldn't need a dating agency, right? And this is all going to be determined statistically, the dating and data, right? So it's going to follow each other, kind of like a parallel, like we said. Now here's number 2, right? Data analysis study 2 on top, same independent variables, but how does it impact happiness as a yes-no category, right? And Diana dichotomous happiness, somebody with a totally different emotional structure that's just happy yes-no, right? Just hot or cold, right? That's what we say sometimes, either hot or cold. How would she get along with someone per se named Humor? Would someone named Humor be into the hot or cold? I don't know. That's what makes any type of analysis so interesting, is you don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but until you can actually do the statistical tests and examine it empirically, you could just go on speculating forever. So that's why it's so exciting to have an alternate to lifelong speculation, right? So now our third one. So these are our studies. Once we apply the 6 steps of data analysis to each of these 3 studies, you'll have, like I said, templates and maps for doing these analyses as many times as you need. And you'll have experience, you'll grasp it conceptually, and you'll think like a researcher, because that's how researchers think through these 6 steps. It's very, very important. So 3, the last one, so our dependent variable happiness will be in 3 categories, same independent variables, and the dependent client will have a 3-category emotional structure, right? Happy, yes, no, kind of neither, somewhat, right? How would she get along with those suitors? Which one's right for her? So as we said, we're going to apply the 6 steps of analysis to complete these studies. Once the studies are completed, you'll be able to examine any type of dependent variable. You'll be able to do any type of study. And then you'll see in parentheses cross-sectional, because cross-sectional means you have one data point, right? So our outcomes are one data point. So it's not over time, it's not pre and post, right? There's not a pre-test, a post-test, or multiple dependent variables, right? There's just that one moment in time, that one measurement, and that's a cross-sectional study. That's what we're looking at here. If you had to do, say, a pre-post where they took scores at one point and then scores at another point, you could do it would be the same structure, the same 6 steps of analysis, but instead of, say, ANOVA, you might use MANOVA, which looks at the multiple data points. But let's first get a foothold with this whole structure and learning it through the cross-sectional analysis, which, take my word for it, learning how to do the complete array of cross-sectional analyses, in a limited amount of weeks is phenomenal. It took me years to learn that. but we've condensed it all here. So it took me years because there was a lot of mistakes made along the way, right? It would have been a lot shorter if I'd have known what steps just to do, right? So that's what we're doing here. So in the coming weeks, we're going to apply each step to each study in a progression, right? So we're going to take study number 1, all the independent variables with Happy at a continuous scale, and we're going to do data entry, checks of data integrity, the univariate, bivariate, multivariate analysis, and the write-up. And then we're going to apply that to the second study and then the third study, right? So we're going to apply those 6 steps. This is going to be some great experience that I'm looking forward to. Okay, everybody. I know this is kind of new to everyone, and this was a lot, right? We're kind of front-loaded the conceptual information because the statistics are really kind of easy. It's the conceptual information that is hard to come by. So that's why we're trying to absorb that first, and then we'll apply everything to the conceptual information, and that'll be the best for our learning. Okay, thanks everybody, and I will talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.